When Dredd can't go it alone, he calls for backup. Here's your look at the Hiya Toys Judge Dredd Exquisite Mini of Judge Anderson. Exquisite Mini is a new standard settings series for 1/18th scale, featuring super articulation action figures from Hiya Toys. Grabbing the old tape measure, the first thing we're going to do is, well, I guess technically the second thing we're going to do is measure off to the top of Anderson's head, as the first thing I did want to do is thank the folks over at Hiya Toys that did provide this sample of the Judge Dredd Judge Anderson that we could have a look in this review. Back to measuring, Judge Anderson with the tape measure right to the very top of her head seems to stand about 4 inches in height, or the figure is going to be about 10 centimeters tall. And of course, for your size comparisons, let's slide on over Judge Anderson and free up a little bit of space to bring back in the earlier looked at Judge Dredd, who in this case actually is about the same size as Judge Anderson. I thought it may have been the case where Dredd may have been a tad bit taller, but if you actually look at them, they're about the same size, give or take. Their judge suits aren't the only thing that these two figures have in common, as it seems to be the case that they share all the same accessories. Obviously, in the case of swapped out hands, Anderson's hands are going to be a little bit smaller than Dredd's, but other than that, all the accessories seem to be exactly the same. Like, for example, the display stand we'll look at first. Once again, we're treated to a rectangular display stand, what seems to be the Cursed Earth. And if we bring in the one that we got from Judge Dredd, maybe short of just a little bit of color being darker on Dredd's, they seem to be identical to one another, which is fine. I don't expect them to change the terrain at all. Plus, too, as well, the way that you have these configured, who cares if it really means that the skeleton's going to be in the exact same spot every single time? To accommodate interlocking these, you get yourself some eye brackets here. The eye brackets, once again, fit into these grooves. But again, I've noticed that the grooves seem a lot tighter, where I really have to force to get the eye brackets in there. Once you get 2 in, technically you only really need the 1, you can then take both stands and connect them with one another. And of course, you would just rinse and repeat the cycles of doing this until eventually you get yourself a larger terrain. Love the idea, again, that we get stuff like this. Move that to the side. Anderson also comes included, like Dredd before, with her Lawgiver gun. I did want to bring in Dredd's for a second here to show you guys that it doesn't seem to be the same coloring. And again, I think mileage may vary. These, I think, are all hand-painted. So it's likelihood that maybe some of them aren't going to be as shiny as the other. Dredd's seems a little shinier than maybe more the tarnished Anderson's Lawgiver, but obviously they're sharing the exact same mold to one another. You can also take the Lawgiver and, like Dredd before, just move the arm out of the way. There's a little holster here on the side of Judge Anderson's leg, and simply then just take the Lawgiver and holster it down the side of her leg. Careful, though, while doing it. It fits fairly well down all the way in, but sometimes, though, if you push it in the wrong way or you push it in on an angle, you're going to bend the end cannon of it, the end barrel. So again, just be careful while you're putting it into her leg. Like the case before, also with Judge Dredd, I guess we can move these eye brackets out of the way because we're not going to be using those much anymore. The figure also comes included with the baton. It really is, by this size, less a baton and more really a baseball bat. If to bring in then Judge Dredd's, I want to show you that they don't seem to be painted the same. Dredd's, for example, was a definitely more lighter brown color, whereas Anderson's is a darker black almost handle, but it seems to be painted the same from that point up. Again, you can fit these into her hands. Now, the figure also comes with, like Dredd, also swapped out hands. She has one designated for holding the Lawgiver, and then she has just a straight gripping hand for holding the baton. To change out the hands, I found it be easier than the Dredd we looked at before. Simply just grab the hands, wiggle it off the peg. If you are feeling like there's resistance, it'd be best to kind of wiggle it as you're popping it off the peg. And then from there, just go ahead and take the hand that you want to use, pop it back in place. These hands, not that I have to state the obvious, are very small, so just be careful when you put it on the peg, as there's been a couple of times already, I got to tell you, I've dropped the hand on the floor and I had a hard time to find it. Once the hand is then in place, just take yourself the Lawgiver, pry the fingers away from the palm as easy peasy as you can without removing, again, the hand from the peg, and then just take the Lawgiver and fit it into her hand. Just twist the hand a little bit, there we go. And now you got Anderson with holding the Lawgiver. Nice looking figure, though. And of course, if you did want to have her holding a baton, simply just then rinse and repeat, pop this hand off then the other side, and then just put the baton on that side. Let's go ahead and remove this right now, because I just have this worry that I'm going to be losing, dropping it on the floor, and then I'm never going to be able to find it. Getting a little closer look at Judge Anderson. To this, I'll bring back in Judge Dredd so you can see that they're very similar looking suits. Obviously, they're all going to be wearing the consistent Judge Dredd judge suits, I should say, not Judge Dredd, but the judge suits. Obviously, Anderson having a female frame is a little bit smaller than Dredd. She's not going to be as big of a bulkier figure as Judge Dredd, but again, to look at them, they're almost exactly the same size to one another. Anderson's legs and limbs, for that matter, are actually a little bit more leaner than Dredd's. And even though she does have the elbow pads, although this one's moving a little bit further up the shoulders there, the elbow pads don't seem to be as cumbersome as Judge Dredd's, where I can actually get in there and actually move her elbows around. Closer inspection on her face. It's a really pretty portrait here of Judge Anderson. I think it looks fairly good, looks like Judge Anderson from the comics. Blonde hair, of course. She does have the large shoulder pad on the one side of the eagle, and the more barrel-shaped shoulder pad on the other side. The paint's really good on all in all on this figure. I like the more rosier colors of red that they've added to the cheeks, the areas around the eyes, and even though the lips are painted quite well considering the size of this figure. Let's just step back for a second and realize that these are 3 3/4 inch, 4-inch scale figures. And I think, again, like the paint proves Hiya Toys is doing this right when it comes to painting these figures. Of course, you've got the nice gold being used here for the larger shoulder pad of the eagle on the one side, shingled as you can see, and they've added a little bit darker brown, almost airbrushed or washed across that to bring out some of the details. But then on the other side, of course, then you've got the barrel-shaped or rounder-shaped shoulder pad. And again, it doesn't seem to limit the articulation as much as you may think. Even like with the larger shoulder pad, I can still easily bring the arms out at 90 degrees. We're going to talk more about that in a moment. The badge itself, very large, you can see on the side of her body. It's a little kind of harder to make out what's going on there, but again, some really nice painted gold added in there. You got the chain that runs all the way to the top of her collar, and that seems to also be painted quite well too. I'm very impressed for how small of a canvas we have to work with, how well they're able to go in there and actually paint all these little details. Speaking of details, the belt buckle, once again, you've got your stuff, the stars and the stripes. Although I noticed on Anderson's, it's a little clearer to see. Judge Dredd's, I only really pointed out that there was red and white stripes. I mean, I almost even overlooked the fact that there was the blue and the stars on the top of it. Anderson's, it seems to be a little bit clearer and easier to see. Then you can also make out as well, she has the multiple pockets making up the majority of her belt. Again, you got some nice dark wash added in there as well. Still the same type of knee pads as Dredd's, although a little, again, smaller. Nicely colored with some darker green added in there as well. And of course, we got the large clunky looking boots that they wear. In this case, once again, you've only got one singular peg on the bottoms of her feet, like the Dredd we looked at before, so there's only one option when it comes to attaching her onto the Cursed Earth display stand. You don't have to choose wisely. You only have to choose this foot on this side here. For the figure's articulation, going back to Anderson's head. Now, her head, unlike Dredd, his head was attached to his neck. So when you moved the neck, you moved everything all at once. With Anderson, on the other hand, you actually have independent ball joints just working for the head alone. The neck doesn't seem to be a case where you can actually move the neck around. Almost for a second, it looked like it was a separate piece from the rest of her torso, but I think it's all one piece. You can rotate the head all the way around. You can, of course, have the head looking down, up, back, and forth also as well. As for the shoulders, here's the only, again, limitations when it comes to these figures. Just because, again, in the size of the shoulder pads, you can't rotate the arms all the way around. I would not advise it, at least. Still, though, you're able to pull off 90 degrees with the arms. Well, that's at least something. Figure has a single hinge in the elbow. You can rotate the arm back and forth, and the hands rotate all the way around. Just be careful while you're doing it. Upper torso, once again, is on a ball joint. Lower torso, just behind the belt, also seems to be relying on a ball joint. The legs split out once again. You can bring the legs forward. You can bring the legs back. Swivel at the top of where the leg is attached. There's a double hinge on the knee, which is nice to see. Oh, I did rhyme that. And there's also a hinge on her ankle, where you can also rock it back and forth as well. Nice overall looking figure. I'm glad to see that we didn't get just Dredd alone. I mean, Dredd's a fantastic looking figure, don't get me wrong, but I'm glad to see that we're starting to get some of the judges as well. And again, we will be looking at those in upcoming reviews, thanks to the folks over at Hiya Toys. For wrapping up, of course, the review end of things before we jump on over to the turntable, let's just get Anderson to stand, put her a little bit more center in the frame here, and then, of course, we'll bring back in Judge Dredd. The colors are pretty consistent. If anything, I would say maybe there's darker greens being used for Anderson's body than what we get with Judge Dredd. Judge Dredd seemed to be a little bit paler of a green that they used. I think the colors are a little bit richer, maybe on Anderson's suit than what we got for Dredd. And of course, she does benefit from having some additional head articulation that Dredd did all rely on his large tree trunk neck. But these are great looking figures. Really great looking job done by, of course, the folks over at Hiya Toys. Smaller scale, yes. Not everybody's all keen on the idea of collecting 3 3/4-inch scale figures, but if you are, and yeah, you're a Judge Dredd fan, definitely jump on board getting not only Judge Anderson that we looked at in this review, but also the earlier looked at Judge Dredd as well. Nobody really has to say that just because you got yourself 2 display stands, it has to then occupy 2 figures. In fact, seeing as I did interlock these earlier into the review, why not make use of both of them? And then you can have a wider stance on any figure that you decide to pose on top of it, like the case here with Judge Anderson. Of course, obviously, the more that you get of these figures, the more display stands you'll have to work with, and you have yourself a much larger terrain in which all the judges can be poised and ready for, well, of course, dispensing justice. Looking at, of course, the detailing done here for Judge Anderson, what a great looking figure this one is. Again, not everybody is going to be keen on collecting the 3 3/4-inch scale figures. For me, somebody that grew up loving G.I. Joes, this is right up my alley. I love the idea of getting 3 3/4-inch scales, and it doesn't even just matter whether it's Judge Dredd, but all the other stuff that Hiya has been knocking out of the park in the earlier years, like the RoboCop stuff. I love the RoboCop Kane, for example. The Predators, the Aliens, and even the Injustice figures have all been fantastic. But being a big fan of Judge Dredd, loving what they're doing here with the comic line of stuff, and I know I did mention in the review of Judge Dredd when we wrapped up things for his review that I would love to have seen them approach maybe the movie line as well. Considering that they're also branching off into other movie properties, the recently announced Rambo, for example, might give me some indication that maybe they're also planning to branch into a movie line of also 3 3/4-inch scales, and hopefully that doesn't rule out the potential of possibly getting movie tied-in Dredd figures, not only for what we got with the Judge Dredd from Carl Urban's approach of Judge Dredd, but also what we did get earlier with Sylvester Stallone. I think there's definitely room to grow when it comes to the Judge Dredd figures. But what do you guys think of Judge Anderson? Not a bad looking figure at all. Weigh in your thoughts. Let me know down below in the comment section. Is this a line you could see yourself certainly getting on board? And while I'm doing this as well, I'd like to thank, of course, the folks over at Hiya Toys, as always. They did take the time and provide not only the samples of Judge Dredd, not only the sample of Judge Anderson, but of the other Judge Dredd characters that we will be looking at in upcoming reviews. If you guys enjoyed this video, why not hit with a like? If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing and certainly on board to see more, then make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, yes, and that you're also turning on the bell notification, sure, and that you're also coming back on a regular basis with Peepers Fully Peeled, because we will be looking at more exquisite minis, courtesy of the folks over at Hiya Toys for future videos. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.